Hi, I'm Nancy Perkins with Belfast Senior College, and it's my privilege to be interviewing today Brenda Smith. Brenda is our treasurer, but she's also, most importantly, an instructor. And she recently completed a course called The Story of Story, which I was privileged to be a part of. So I'd like to introduce Brenda, and I really want to know a little bit about how you came to Belfast and how you got involved with senior college.
Sure. Um, Belfast has been a part of my life ever since I was a really small girl. My mom's parents, my grandmother and grandfather, were both born and spent their early years in Belfast. Um, my grandmother was from Morrill, my grandfather born in Belfast, but grew up out in Montville. And they both had families with lots of siblings. So when I was young, my grandmother and grandfather liked to come up to Belfast, where their extended family still lived. And in fact, three of my great aunts owned cottages at Temple Heights, which is just beyond Bayside in Northport. So I've always had Belfast, as a part of me and my soul. And when I got ready to retire, I wanted to get away from Boston, and I wanted to go to a place where I would feel peaceful and really be able to enjoy my retirement years. And believe it or not, Nancy, I was sitting on my sofa one night down in Reading, Massachusetts, where I had been living, and thinking of all the places I've traveled in my life. And I've traveled to a lot of places, and thinking about, now that I could move anywhere I wanted to move in the world, where would I want to move to? And it was literally like a neon sign that went off in my brain that said Belfast. And it surprised me, but when I started to think about it, this is a very happy place for me. And so I started to do some investigation and found out that Penobscot Shores is a lovely retirement community here, right on Penobscot Bay. And believe it or not, there were units available.
Wow.
So I made the decision, moved here to Belfast about 2 years ago now.
So you've been here 2 years, but your involvement just goes way, way back. What did you do in Boston? What was your professional background?
Sure. I went to school for accounting at Bentley, what was then college, but is now Bentley University, and got a degree in accounting. I went on to become a certified public accountant working with Arthur Anderson. And um, even though it wasn't the most fun job being an accountant, I mean, it's a lot of numbers. What I realized that was really good about it was that it was a great way to make a living. And so that having that under my belt, a way to always make a good living, I was able to then branch off and do some more fun and exciting things, like moving to California and starting to work for a whitewater rafting company, but also becoming their controller and doing all of their financial management. So
Well,
I
and your travels took you lots of different places, um, just from the writing, the stories I've read. But what were you doing then professionally that enabled you to go to South America and
mhm,
all this traveling?
mhm.
What?
Well, my first trips outside of the United States were with the whitewater rafting company called
Oh,
Sobek Expeditions. And the first trip I ever took was to go to Tanzania. I
wow,
didn't, I did not decide to go on that trip. My boss decided for me that I was going to go on that trip.
Tanzania. Wow. The
And
ele-
that's exactly the way I felt about it. I had no idea where in the world it was, but I didn't want to look like I was kind of dumb by saying, "Where is that?" So that night I went home and got out my world atlas. Of course, back then we didn't have Google, so
Google.
had to get out the world atlas and opened it up, and my worst nightmares came true. I found out it was like in the middle of Africa, and my whole knowledge of Africa at that point in my life, I think, was from having read Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Oh,
And that is not a happy book. That's a very scary book, actually. So my first trip was I was really quite fraught with anxiety, but I learned something on that trip, and that was that I fell in love with the world. I was just mesmerized with all the different things that I saw, the people I met, the wildlife. It was a phenomenal voyage and journey to take.
Is that what then made you a writer? That falling in love with the world? Did you start writing then?
I used to take notes about the trips that I went on. I don't think I ever actually thought that I would write all of this down, but as I went along in life, I think I began to reflect on the experiences that I had when I worked for SOBEC. And then after that, I went to work for the Agency for International Development. So I lived for another 8 years overseas, both in Pakistan and Bolivia. And I think that the things that I learned were things that I felt compelled to share with other people. And writing is a good way to share your experiences with someone else and to have it put on paper sort of in a permanent sort of way. So I would say yes, the adventures that I have had in my life ultimately were the things that bubbled up to make me want to share them with other people.
What prompted you? Well, obviously, your ability to, your background of travel plus the reflection of that travel would lead to, the writing, but to teaching. How did the teaching element get in? Because was this your first class? Or have you taught other classes?
This is the first writing class that I've actually taught. However, I went through one other step between just being an accountant and traveling around the world. I actually went back to get a master's degree, and that was in a very unique subject, which was philanthropy and media. And it was a course that Suffolk University offered in connection with a television production company called The Visionaries that ran a series on PBS for many years called The Visionaries. So I got a master's degree in basically video production and how it's used to help further the missions of nonprofit organizations. And that is really where I learned about storytelling. The very first class that I ever took talked about the brain and how we perceive things through our senses and how we process emotional content of an event or a feeling that you are having with someone else. And so once I got my degree in philanthropy and media, I really got into doing video production a lot, both for my local cable TV station. But we also had produced our own student episode of The Visionaries, which aired on PBS. And myself and one of the other students really took the bulk of the responsibility for that production. Yeah, and I have won a lot of local awards for my videography or storytelling. And then I kind of stopped with that for a while. And when I retired, I realized I need to get back into storytelling. And I started writing. And at the senior college, I wanted to, everybody was talking about how much fun it was to teach and that there was the need for additional courses to be taught. So I said, well, let me give it a shot. Let me try and teach people what I have learned about how to write a story that will be memorable. And so that's how I came up with the idea for my course called The Story of Story.
And I can attest it was a really inspirational experience for me, and I think for everyone else in the class. It was really something. It stimulated a lot of us who I think had sort of dormant feelings that we wanted to get this stuff down. That's why we took the course, but I never thought it was going to be so effective in teaching me how to approach it. And that's the secret of I guess good teaching. Did you find that Zoom was an impediment to getting the story across to us?
I don't think so.
I
Um,
didn't think so either. I thought it was terribly effective.
in fact, when I was thinking about what I could teach, I had some ideas for other topics that I thought might not come across Zoom as well as this writing class. But the writing class, we were all together in a room. We had 7 students, participants in the class, and the Zoom screen seems to be just perfect for about 8 people on it.
Exactly, right.
Too many more than that, and it gets, you lose it a little bit. But I thought that we actually kind of got to the feeling we got to know each other enough, and we got to having this feeling that we actually, even though we were on the screen, we really were all together.
Very much
Um,
feeling.
and the bonding, one of the things that surprised me the most about this class was how all of the students bonded so closely together.
Yeah.
I will just say that when I was telling everyone that I was sad that the class was coming to an end, somebody shouted out, "Please, can we have a reunion?"
Right.
And
You're
everyone jumped
right.
right on board. So that was kind of a fun
I
way.
think that's the first senior college reunion class that I know of. I don't think anybody else has done one, so that's a first. Plus the fact that the stories were, we fortunately have the Corona Chronicle, and we've got to figure out some way to get that Corona, I think, down on paper and out to the world, because there's so much it's been it'll be a year and a couple of months that we've been putting those out, about 2 a month. And they're amazing, the breadth of articles in them, and all of yours. I mean, the elephant, the trip in Colombia. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much information has been exchanged between people in that silly little publication. I mean,
It's not a silly publication. It
no, it's not.
really is a wonderful publication.
I,
And
I'm very, very, if there's one thing, I'm really pleased that that has taken off like it has. I mean, from recipes to good poetry to great stories to wonderful articles to, even jokes. I think somebody put, we had a joke in one time that was silly, but it was nice to see how people are thinking. Well, so you certainly will consider teaching another course. What other courses float around in your mind to teach?
well, I used to do this when my 2 nieces were very young. I came up with a course about the Amazon rainforest, and I taught it to elementary school kids, and they were absolutely mesmerized by it. Part of the activity of the storytelling to the elementary school children was to have them actually reforest the 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 Amazon forest. And what I had is my dad helped me make some trees, and each of the students had to, draw a leaf to put back onto the tree. So
Oh,
we talked about how the forests were being, denuded and what an impact that would have on the world, but that we needed to be very conservation minded and try to regrow some of these forests that were being destroyed. And we did it in a sort of symbolic way. So I did that course way back when, and there's a lot I know. I've been in rainforests in several countries of the world, and I kind of have this idea of doing a class that digs into what are the things that we're losing, not just the trees, but what are we losing when we lose the forests? So that's one idea. And then I lived in Pakistan for 4 years, and that was a very eye-opening experience. Being a woman, a foreign woman in an Islamic country is like being sort of a third sex, really,
mhm.
still taboo from what the men are doing a lot of the time, but you have more freedom than the Pakistani women have. So you get to go and see and do things that sometimes the Pakistani women themselves can't do. But the women play a very important role in Pakistan in keeping the households going, large households, extended family households, raising children. And actually, they have a huge impact on the economy, because though they can't go out to the marketplace, they send their husbands out. And they control a lot of how the money in a household is spent. So
Pakistani woman cannot go to the market herself?
um,
I mean,
generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, women don't leave their homes unless they are accompanied by a male family member.
wow.
Now, some of the women that I worked with, their husbands would drop them at work. They would, of course, come into USAID, the mission building, and do their jobs. But those were really sort of the forward-thinking women.
And husbands too, probably.
Yeah, and husbands too. And I think one of the most interesting things that I spent a lot of time learning about and experiencing was this whole concept of arranged marriage. And I went there kind of like, horrified by the thought that somebody would tell me who I was going to marry. But after having lived in Pakistan for 4 years, I left with a rather strong respect for their traditions. Now, not every marriage is a great marriage, but what some of the married couples told me was that when a marriage is just based on love, what is there to hold it together? And when it is based on a sense of obligation or duty, the two partners really have to learn to respect and compromise and be strong as a couple.
This is true. I mean, I've read a lot of Indian books where, exactly the same thing. China had the same thing. I mean, this was the norm in most of the world for a long time, arranged marriages. It's only, been fairly recently. I mean, even the British, the upper classes, it was arranged. So, this our new concept of marry for love and regret in time, is that I don't know what holds it together when love is flown away. One wonders, but it counts for the divorce rate. But
yeah, that's exactly my Pakistani staff members would say to me. So how are love marriages working in the United States? We've got the highest divorce rate in the world.
Yeah, how's that love doing?
Yeah.
No, well, actually, both of those. In fact, you talked about teaching children. I'm not so sure that the idea of a group of seniors making leaves for the tree wouldn't be a very good thing to do. I mean, it'd be very interesting. I can remember as a child cutting out different shaped leaves, but I'd like to learn more about the leaves of the rainforest. I mean, they're different. I think the rainforest, in fact, I'd like a little rainforest right now. The dryness is getting to me. But and anything about Pakistan and the life of women would make for a wonderful course. There's just so many topics. I have come to the conclusion that if you are passionate about a subject and you can talk to other people, you can teach. And you obviously are passionate about travel, about people, about storytelling, about the world, and those are the elements that make for a good teacher. And I think, boy, have we been lucky at senior college that there have been so many people that are passionate about subjects that they want to share with their fellow seniors.
Right. And I feel at the senior college, I mean, nobody's earning a degree. Nobody has to reach a certain standard of learning or understanding or comprehension. People are there because they want to be there and they want to learn. And that takes the pressure off somebody who's going to teach there, because you don't have to try and make sure everybody gets through, with a certain level of,
and you don't have to judge them either. There's not that judgmental element that comes into,
No, not at all.
College.
I was going to just say, circling back to the story of story class, one of the most difficult things for a person who starts to write is the thought or the idea of being published. And most people are really afraid of that. They don't, they either don't know how to get started to do it, or they just feel like their work isn't good enough for anybody else to be reading. And so the Chronicles was perfect as a launching pad for the people in my class to actually have their works sent out into the world.
Right.
And so that in and of itself was to empower people to write, and then actually empower them to share their writings with the world.
I was talking to someone and I said, oh, they said something, would I like to join the Zoom something? And I said, oh, no, I can't. I've got to work on my story for class. They said, what class? And I said, well, senior college. Well, you're not supposed to have homework at senior college. I said, it's not homework. It's love work. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I mean, that really is. Although it does remind me, the feeling I get in the good classes I take, it reminds me of the college courses I took in my major, where I wanted to be there. I was excited about it. I was passionate about learning about it. And those classes have stayed with me throughout my life. Now, my subject was English history. And, what do I do with that today? Not much, but I have my class. Well, in fact, I got sick and couldn't teach the class, and somebody picked it up for me, The Six Wives of Henry VIII. So, it's those things are all bouncing around there. Well, I think we're very lucky to have Brenda Smith on our faculty, and also on our board as treasurer, and also serving on too many committees to count, and a book club, and just you're a very busy Belfast person, which I think is what makes you a good teacher and a good person to have in Belfast Senior College and in Belfast and Penobscot Shores.
Thank you for that.
There someday.
And I always used to hear people who retired say, oh, I'm so much busier now that I'm retired than I've ever been before in my life. And I think my vision of retirement was not at all to slow down, stop, or whatever.
Change.
But it's to do the things that I truly love
to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm finding that I love teaching, and I love seeing people realize that they have talents within themselves, and learning ways for them to express those. So
well, we may have to start our own publishing company to get Corona Chronicles out, but I can see it in a book form. I really can. And I hope to do it. I thought about if we could get, sort of a newspaper, but, we don't have the kind of newspaper that would pick up and run with it. And then I thought about going to Stephen King, because, he's very big on, he just gave money to an elementary school to publish stories that the children have written. Well, maybe he'd be interested in publishing, stories that seniors have written in Maine. So I don't know. It's worth a try. Well, I appreciate very much your time and your energy and your I hate to overuse the word passion, but your passion for this, and I thank you. And I hope other people will listen and realize that Zoom can be a real blessing during this time. And I think we'll still have Zoom once we're through, with COVID. We'll still have people who don't feel like going out, who can't go out. Weather is bad. So
we learned one thing, didn't we, Nancy, that with the use of Zoom, we can get classmates from other parts of Maine, other senior colleges. And I thought that was really exciting. Out of our class, we had mostly, majority of people were from other parts of Maine. So I think
San Francisco, don't forget Mary.
Right.
In Belfast, but still, I mean, it just, I was always tickled that we'd sign on and we'd have turtlenecks and sweaters, and there was Mary in a low-cut t-shirt. But then Denise came on, and she must have a warm house because she always had less clothes. I'm sitting in a room surrounded by cold. Okay, well,
Well, I certainly would love to see more of the Belfast members of the senior college sign up for my class. I'd love to have you come in and learn how you can let your talents as a writer shine.
oh, very,
And
very
certainly would
pleasant. Well, I
love.
talked it up and I know one person who's definitely going to be there. And just to show you, Lee Graham from the class
Mhm,
is going to teach a class on growing asparagus next
mhm.
spring, this spring. So, you know, it's symbiosis. It rubs off. I mean, I think people get excited in the classes and gee, I could talk about this. And I'd like to, I mean, we have some potential teachers that have been students for a long time, and it's time to get them out and sharing their love and their knowledge with the
Mhm.
rest of us. All right, well, you have a good day, and we have to count to 5 and we go off again. So anyway, thank you very, very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Bye
You take
bye.
care. Bye-bye.